Good day everyone, and welcome to this tutorial for the impact frames. So cool. So the first one we're going to be looking at is the Darken Background one. So this is a 50% version of the one that you purchased, and it is set up at 50% just for the sake of speed. So as you can see, this is a very basic setup. When you open the file, you're going to see it inside of the node. Just tap out of it. It's not a problem. And of course, we've got a few settings over here. We've got the image, we've got object mask, darken background, softness factor, and blur size. Now, darken background is exactly what it says. It uses the object mask to separate the object out and create an island, if you will, so that everything else can be darkened. But I want to show you guys a very clever trick that came to me today. Very thankful for this one, with a demo file I will be uploading. So if it's not there yet, it'll be up ASAP. So here we have a demo scene. It's also at 50%. I'm going to re-render it so that it actually renders at 50%. I see the outline is a little too thin. Okay, there we go. So this is at 50% just for the sake of speed. So we're going to be adding the darken background node group with append. Okay, so with append, you go to your downloaded files and you look for the darken background one. You go to node tree, and of course you got the darken background right there. You'll see on a lot of these that I did include a basic outline node group. It's not on all of them because not all of them really require it, but on this one it is available, but it's not going to import. We don't need it. Already added outlines, it's fine. So just append that. Now we're going to go group and darken background. So as you can see, it is freaking out because there's nothing there. So just take the matte and put it into object mask. There we go. Now here's the cool part. So what I want to do is I want to include a little bit of my environment just to ground my character more, because if I do this, our character exists in isolation. Now, sometimes this is exactly what you want, okay? In fact, most of the time, this is exactly what you want, but not always. So I'm going to reduce it a little bit for a second, and I'm going to add a map range node out of the vector category. So if I add one, and I just click viewer here because we want to be able to see what we're doing, and I take the depth. Now my map or depth is set to 1,000 meters. Okay, the max is going to be set to 1,000 so that we can just see what we're dealing with. And now I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to bring this way down because I don't want too much in here. Okay, we just want a little bit of that, and I'm going to bring this down a lot as well. We just want some part of it, okay? So the black area that you're seeing over here represents a floor plane that has a snowy kind of texture on it. It's just to create a fake floor. That's all it is. So you can bring it a lot closer to the Suzanne if you want to, but it's like I said, it's not necessary. So let's say this is going to be 100, and this is going to start at 12. And it's just a little bit behind the Suzanne monkey head. Okay, and we're going to clamp this and use ease instead, so it's just a smoother transition. Linear tends to start and stop a little too fast sometimes, not always, sometimes. And we are going to invert this and add it to our matte. Okay, this will give us more detail. If you want to, you can just use it as is, but sometimes depending on your object or the distance or whatever the case might be, it won't be full on white, but you do have that option to just use this straight. But I recommend mixing it with your factor over here, your mask. So let's just say add, make sure it's clamped so you don't get excessive values. And when you view that now, you'll see that there's a brightness to the foreground. So I'm just going to darken it up There you go, you see? So if you want to, you can obviously bring it in a lot more. It's up to you, but this just helps to give your characters a little bit more of a floor. It grounds them in that suspension of disbelief. That's the whole purpose of including a little bit of your environment with something like this. So on to the next one. Okay, so before I kick off this next section, I want to show you guys something. Blender has a weird issue with the normals, and I don't get it. Maybe somebody can explain this to me in the comments. When I made the nodes, okay, I built them to have the normals facing the camera. This makes it easier for you to have a flash frame because it fills the frame consistently. But this is a big but. Look at this. So this is with the file itself. This is your downloaded file. You open it, you put in the normal look, and this is what you get. Okay, you can see here. There it is. Okay, I switched to Eevee quickly just to test consistency, blah blah blah. All that kind of stuff is good, and this is the result. But look here when I use it in the demo scene. Now suddenly all the normals are coming from the left-hand side. Now this might be due to camera rotation, it might be due to the fact that it's not Tuesday. It might have to do with the fact that Saturday might be 7 days away. I don't know. The problem is that this can cause inconsistency with your result. So I just found this interesting and I thought I would share this with you guys so that you don't get it and go like, well, what is this? This is not right. So this is just so you know, just so you guys are aware of it, because you know, it's just one of those weird things. So if you want to, you can always adjust the node group to use the normal dot versus the normal node itself on the inside. So moving on, let's get to adding the node to your project. What you do is you go to the file and you say append. Okay, we're at the file, we're going to get the flash frame one, and we're going to go node tree, flash frame, and append. So under group, flash frame, add it in there, connect the normals, and result. So in this case, it uses the normals to create the mask that we need in order to brighten up our values. So as you can see, because of the slight rotation issue that I spoke about just now, you can see that the light is predominantly coming from the left-hand side, which is fine. It's not going to affect our result by much. So if you want to change that, you can just go into the node as I said before. Now this is going to be slightly easier. So you can use control again, like I've spoke about in the post this morning, and just set it to a diagonal setting. This works for the demo shot. But like I said, you know, this is not necessary. It's only going to appear for a 30th of a second, a 24th of a second, a 25th of a second, or even a 60th of a second. It depends on what you work with. So it can stay the same, it can change, it's up to you. It's customizable. That's the whole point of these nodes, is that I built everything for you so that you can just throw it into your projects and they work. Simple as that. So as you can see, the flash frame works beautifully. It creates beautiful space. Of course, the background is so bright that you're not going to see much, but this is also adjustable. If you go into the node, you can see that we have our brightness adjusted here for non-normal information. So if you wanted to include a little bit more, then you can just slide it to include a little bit more of your shot, like that. Of course, I wouldn't recommend adjusting these values, because messing with the node means messing with the structure of the feature. It is good per project, but I wouldn't recommend it if you want to make these like your defaults and to mess with your defaults. I used defaults for all of these nodes to make sure that they're pretty much plug and play. So if you stick with those, you're good. Okay. What I also did to make this one a little bit more bright or feel brighter than it is to take the white part, the whitest part of these values, and to blur them over the image itself. You can see that over here. So there's the normal mask, there's the normal based flash, and here is the blurring part of it. So it's multiplied by 2, and it just looks great. You can see it individually quickly. If I just do this, and there you have it. It's the image is black and white version with the flash that's coming from the normals, and that gives you a very nice, soft landscape painting kind of vibe. And that's it. Now let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this is our normal rotation one. When you just open the file, this is what you see. Again, just tab out of it. And you can see we have a few options here. We don't use the image one here at all. The reason for that is because we're basically relighting the shot as if some sort of major flash occurred. So you don't get colors. It's either pure black or pure white. So you don't use it. It's useless information. So no extra textures or anything like that will come into play here, except for, again, what is in the normal map itself. So don't be shocked by that one. Of course, our mask remains the same, and we'll get to why we actually need one for this one. And of course, we can switch a background mode here. This is one of the coolest features for this one. Okay, so we're going to quickly append it. So append, go to your files and select the normal rotation one, node tree, and it is added. So group and impact frames, normal, boom. So this is obviously not going to work. We just want the normal. It generates its own outlines. It's lovely. We're just going to use it like that. Okay. So if we don't have an object mask here, you do have a different option. Okay, you absolutely do. So let's say we have our normals, but they don't show because our mask is set to 0 by default. Okay, the reason it's set to 0 by default is to say if there's no mask, there is nothing. It's just one of those things. It's to make sure we always have something showing. So in order for you to exclude everything, so then you can just use a mix node, set it to clamp, and let's use the matte, and put that in the object mask. Then you only get this. Okay, so if you rotate through this, you will see that the normals do their cycle thing, which is very cool, but this is not a very good look in general. It's just, there's a reason why we need the mask. Okay, I do these things for a reason. This just looks awful. This looks useful to some extent if you're, you know, kind of faking that ink drawing kind of vibe, but that's not what we're going for. So just, it's not. Okay, so we're getting a mask in there, and there is our little Suzanne sitting on the ground. Now, obviously, in a proper context, she would not just be sitting on the ground. She would be moving. She would be making contact. She would be moving and shaking, so to speak. So let's just pretend that she's doing her thing, and let's move on to the background. So we have 2 modes here for the background. Let's just open this up. It's set to wobbles and it has linear. Now default is set to wobbles because it's more universal. But for your more action-oriented sequences, sometimes you need direction. So for example, let's say your character is coming down hard on some, let's say a villain. Okay, then you need the lines to be vertical to emphasize that motion. If they're running super fast, you want them to be horizontal to emphasize the motion. If it's something water-based, if it's something liquid, if it's something like ice or something that's static or thick, then something like the wobbles is more what you're going for. Remember, your story influences your creative choices. It's just one of those things. So I'm going to show you what linear looks like. Very simple. And of course, it is rotatable. I kind of like it if it's at like 45 degrees or something. It just has a very cool stylistic kind of thing. You know, you just want to make a major print of this and hang it on a wall. And if you cycle through that, you'll see that the frames are different every single time, especially with the normal rotation going on. Such a cool feature. I love this node. I use this in an example video that I hope I'll be able to show right now, where I just use that clean sequence from the demonstration video to just flash into some frames and then go for the linear one, which we'll get to later. And this is the one I used on 0, so that the lines were like perfectly straight, and the emphasis was beautiful because of the linear lines. It was a great transitional frame, which is what this is. This is one of those transitional frames, just like the flash frame is, that helps you transition from the clean image into your special impact frames, which can actually sometimes be an impact sequence depending on the situation. And then of course it just either fades out or it just pops back, or you can even use the flash frame to transition back to your clean frames. It's totally up to you. This is very interpretive of the situation that you have. I remember one example was with these glowing orbs or something that was like in a construction zone. It was on a demo video that was like a compilation of these kinds of things, where the transition back was pretty much just a fade from this super white filled frame to just the normal one with a tiny glow reduction where the contact was. So again, just be creative with it. Just be really, really creative with it. And that brings us to the next one. Okay, so the next one, we have the linear lines. So just add them to your project, same way we did before. You just go File and Append. Okay, now Shift A and get the lines. And immediately you get black. Now the reason it looks so dense and ugly is because we don't have much detail going here. If it's on HD, it'll be a lot finer. If you're still not happy with the scale, you can always just make it a little bit finer in here as well. And of course there is a lot on the inside that you can adjust as well. So yeah, this is just for the sake of an example. I do want to say that, like I demonstrated earlier, sometimes the normals don't align the way you want them to in terms of facing the camera. I have no idea why it's not consistent. I just don't. I think it might have something to do with world alignment. I always thought that it's relative to the camera. Apparently not. So in this instance, we know what the normals should be to be facing the camera, so I'm going to quickly adjust that. So inside the node, you go all the way to the left and you'll see that there is our little normal node. So I'm going to keep using control. It just means that we use regular intervals, makes it a lot easier to control. So as you can see, the brightness is now facing the user. It's not super clear, but just you can see. You can see. So I'm going to, oh goodness, that just made it weird. So I'm going to set it to full HD and I'm going to re-render this. Okay, there we go. That is very cool. So if you want to, again, you can refine these things. This is specifically the one I'm using. So if you want more a detail, you would increase this value to go more towards the white, so that there's more info that comes in. You would probably also reduce the black a little bit, but it's just one of those things where you have to eyeball it, and this is a very good default. That's why I'm not changing it. Okay, so that's lovely. So if I take this whole thing and I remove the object mask and I set it to the whole, it's going to use the normals to determine what should have normal values, what should not, and the image will be in whatever is considered not functional space, whatever the phrasing might be for that, and that gives you this kind of result that includes some of your environment. Now this is only going to look this way specifically because the mountains are 3D. That's why they have normal values. So let me show you what the actual normal output looks like. So vector normal, and use the normal over here. And let me show you guys what that looks like. And that's why we get what we get. So only this and this will give us space for our image to show. Now, if all of this were black, it would look totally different. So let me give you an example. So let's subtract the mountains using a separate crypto map. Let's just see what the mask looks like. If it's correct, it is correct. So let's subtract this from our normal influence. So let's say color mix, and take the normal, and that is going to be the black only area, and that's going to go into normals, and that should give us a very different result. Now you can see the mountains are being compensated for only by the image, because only our monkey is considered to have any normal value whatsoever. So you can see that there's this bright spot kind of thing going on here. You can shrink that inside of the node itself. So if you go in here at the top where it says whole image processing, remember that references this one, masked versus whole. And you can just reduce the size of this spherical texture. Now this spherical texture is determined by this color ramp over here that adds it over the image. So you can adjust the size or you can adjust the brightness. So I'm going to just adjust the brightness. And there you have some, let's call it uncertain details about the mountains in the background. And I think it's very cool. I really, really, really love it. I can just see this in action already. It's just so cool. Now, of course, this one contains a very cool feature that I'm going to demonstrate quickly. I'm going to just render this again at 50% just for the sake of speed. Remember, your PC will probably be faster. My PC is over 10 years old. So just one of those things. So check out this dissolve feature. This is so cool. Now, many times when people make this kind of thing, they kind of cheap out by fading it to white. That's not a dissolve. It's a kind of dissolve, but that's not actually dissolve. That's just fade to white. Now, when you dissolve something, there has to be an inner working that adjusts the actual structure of your images content, and that's what this dissolve feature does. So look at this. It affects the threshold. Look at that. So let's say you want to fade to the resulting the result of the action, or you want to switch to a different scene, you know, like meanwhile. You can use this kind of feature to fade to white fade, in this case dissolve to white, and just get that feathery kind of dissolving vibe going. It's very, very cool. And of course our regular customers are also here. We get sketch line scale. We've got that's the line, that the texture that forms the lines. We've got the distortion texture scale. Now the distortion texture is a noise texture that influences a wobble effect that's applied to the image. Now the reason why this wobble is applied is when you're doing very quick sketchy lines, your objects are never exactly the same size, and the lines, their borders, all that kind of stuff is never in exactly the same place. So you need something to make your image different between every single frame, but not so different that it doesn't match. So you kind of play for difference, but not too different. That's why there's a texture influence thing here as well. So if you prefer it to be a lot more stable, you reduce this value. If you prefer the warping or the distortion to be a lot more intense, then you up this value. I don't recommend you up it too far though, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so line, you know that. Texture scale, you know that. Dissolve, you know that. Line angle is exactly that. Very cool. I love that. That's so cool. I can just see this printed on a wall somewhere. not this particularly. I mean, we can just adjust it or whatever, but this composition with Suzanne and the mountains and all that kind of stuff, it's just so cool. It's such a cool print. And then of course you can switch between the mask and the whole. It's just very cool. So moving on to the next one. Okay, so here we are with the centralized lines. I have recorded this thing like a million times, so let's hope this one goes perfectly. So all you do is you simply add it. So go append and go centralized lines. There you go. So bam. Okay, so first of all, we need to aim it. Wherever the impact is going to happen or does happen, that's where you put this little crosshairs. Think of this as your actual grid. These are positive values, these are negative values, positive values, negative values. So negative, positive. Oh, it's off screen. Okay, so I'm just going to make it 0.5 and no, not 0.5, 0, because it has to be at the origin. And this one I'm taking down because I want it to be just under Suzanne over there. So that's where the aim is going to be, right about there. Just going to offset the X also a little bit, not completely, just a smidge. Okay, there we go. So that's all this aim does, is it just focuses the centralized effect. So let's quickly connect everything else. We are using normals, our object mask, which is already set to Suzanne for the colored outlines. And we use the picking layer for some additional punch to the effect. And that's pretty much it. So the same as with the others, for some reason, your normals can differ based on the shot. So I think it has to do with camera orientation or something. I have no idea. So you just need to rotate this thing to be 45 degrees for this particular scene. That's where it is. Okay, so that is cool. Distortion texture and distortion texture influence. If you set it higher, it has less effect than if you take it down. I know this feels backward, but for some reason it made more sense when I was actually building it. So for now I'm going to leave it like this. Yeah, so if you turn it up, it's going to, if you put it to 1, it's going to have no effect. If you put it to 0, it's not going to have any effect. The distortion texture scale is the same thing. Basically, this distortion texture thing is to create that wobble effect you get when you hand draw something. It's just to make it different between every single frame. The dissolve into effect is exactly what it says. It's the same as the linear lines one, where it breaks up the image into white. Centralized lines offset, you know what that means. We've got the spike noise scale. You'll see in a second when we use the masked version, I added some spikes and this blowout kind of thing. That's what that's for. It changes the scale of that noise. And we've got the regular noise scale, which determines the look of the fineness of the effect itself over the rest of the image. And of course we have masked versus whole. Masked is when you only want the focus on your objects or characters. Whole is when you want to include the environment details as well. This is when you include your environment when your characters need to be more grounded. For example, if there's like an explosion or a character misses and strikes the ground instead or whatever, that's where you want to include some environment. And of course, we've got spike length adjustment, and that just shortens the spikes, reduces them, doesn't take them away completely. You can try and use excessive values to remove them. We'll give that a shot as well. So let's get a result. So all you need to do is just switch to image. And there we have it. So that is the masked version. So if you say whole, it will use a normal mask combined with the masking itself to give us an effect like this. Now, if you take away the mask itself, you'll still have the spikes, but you will lose this highlight around your masked area. So that's just something to keep in mind. And of course, the dissolving effect. As you can see, it doesn't just fade to white, it actually breaks up the image. So that's very cool. Okay, so with that, I'm going to quickly show you this noise scale feature and this noise scale. So if you up this to 5, you'll see that only the spikes adjust, giving more detail. It's best to just leave it on 2, to be honest, or 3. What was it on? I think it was on 2. Anyway, so the other noise scale I usually set to about 60 sometimes, not always. Sometimes a finer look is better, like you can see right now. It's very, very pretty. And I'm going to render this in full HD so you guys can see a lot more detail. And there you have it. So you can see that the render resolution also does make quite a difference in your final result. Oh, I just absolutely love this. This is so cool. And of course it is anti-aliased because we do now have that anti-aliasing feature. So you're no longer stuck with just, you know, that one thing. And of course this is all open to animation as well. So go nuts, seriously. So I'm going to put this back to 50% HD so we can just quickly demonstrate the spiky thing. Okay, there we have it. So if you up this value, you can see that the size of this burst reduces as well as the size of the spikes. So if you set it to, let's say 5. Yeah, it doesn't do anything. It sticks to that. I think I may have clamped it to 1. I don't know. But it's fine, whatever. If you want to make changes to the node for your projects, you do that. You really do. That's the beauty of the fact that this is a node group. You can change anything in here. So yeah, go nuts. So this is a very cool effect. It's very fun. I hope you guys enjoy this one. So let's get to the next effect. And this is of course our white background glow. I absolutely love this one. This is a very, very, very favorite of mine. It is always very effective with dreams, surreal situations, something that connects to something spiritual or whatever. This is the go-to. I just absolutely love this. So let's get into the demo scene. So again, file, append, find your file, node tree, get it in there. Let's find it, white glow, and node tree, and there it is. Group, node tree. This one just uses the mask, and it pretty much just works on default. So there it is. I did use a slight expansion, you know, the dilate in a road thing. I dilated the the mask a little bit to make sure I actually do get the outlines. If you don't, it tends to eat away at least half of your outer edges, which sucks. So I totally recommend that you just dilate the mask a little bit if you try to build this yourself as just a fun experiment. So we've got the glow size, we've got the softness factor, and of course we can switch between the original and the effect. This just makes it a little bit easier to literally switch between the two. So let's say the character is in a classroom. I remember this on one show. Let's say the character is in a classroom and the character is somehow transported into a metaphysical place, a spiritual place. What would happen is the character would still be sitting there, but everything would just kind of fade, just like a normal dissolve effect, just a normal fade through effect. And that is what this is for. So if you look at the original, and there we go, back to normal. So it's a very, very, very cool effect. It's very useful. You can change the glow size to be a little bit less if you want to. So let's say make it 2. It's totally up to you, whatever you want to use it for. So the softness factor is again that quick blur treatment. And I don't think I added a blur size for that in here because it's not necessary. You're going to pretty much use it as is. It just is one of those things. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to this one. So let's get to the next one. So I'm quickly going to show you guys this one in the original project. What I did is I quickly animated the effect just to demonstrate one way you can use this. So what it does is it goes from complete inversion to a medium gray, which I boosted so that it becomes a white. That's what this value brightness is for. And then it returns to the normal color, but not before the brightness comes down. So the brightness comes down a little bit slower, and it gives us that overly bright kind of gamma feel. So you can see it comes down to a normal level. It's just so cool. Absolutely love this. Now, of course, you feel free to up the brightness for the photo negative inversion thing as well. Now, the reason I added the value is not just for the medium gray. The medium gray was just kind of a happy accident. The main reason I added it is because sometimes the photo negative just doesn't have enough punch to deal with this shot. So what I saw in a tutorial that I shared in the BNPR group is that the guy used a kind of like a bright spot on the render to deal with that kind of dullness. But that's not always going to be functional, especially not in an environment like this. So I just gave you a general brightness value that just swells the values of your image and allows you to do more. So let me show you what that looks like if I up it. See what I mean? Of course, you still get your contrast, all that kind of stuff. It just ups your values based on where they are. So it's very cool. So let's just get that normalized again. So this animation isn't included. I just did it quickly to just demonstrate. Of course, at 50% because that's a lot faster. And that's it. Let's get to the master mix. And last but simply not least, we have the master mixer. Now, this one is not complicated because if you've done everything in the previous sections, then this one will be pretty much straightforward. All this is it allows you to, in a single project, quickly flip between the effects as you would like to time them within your animation. It's pretty much just straightforward. So all you need to do to adjust the effects to your heart's content is to use these outputs for the effect itself and then go into the node after you've connected it. Now, the reason I created it this way is I've noticed that sometimes, not always, but sometimes the viewer node doesn't work inside of node groups. It sometimes just ignores it completely. I don't know why it does that. So just to make sure that that doesn't get to you, or that you have to create special outputs or whatever, I already created them to bypass any possibility of that happening. So let's say we want the centralized lines. That's what it's going to look like by default. And this is what the white background glow is going to look like by default. The inversion is going to look like this. The flash frame is going to look like this. And of course, our darkened background looks like that. So you can see all the effects are there. So let me show you what it looks like on the inside. There are two ways to get in. You can use this little button at the top, or you can just press tab. So here we are. We have all of our effects in line. Don't worry, there's nothing else to control. You just control the values over here. So let's quickly pick one. So let's say we want to adjust the normal rotation. Okay. Because let's say we wanted the linear effect instead of the wobble effect. Okay, so then we go darken, flash frame, normal. Okay, and then we select the linear one. Okay, that's cool. And we want it at, say, 32 degrees. Just a arbitrary number. And we're happy with that. So let's select the flash frame. Okay, and let's make some changes to the flash frame. Let's say, okay, there's nothing to adjust on that. That's fine. We can go in and adjust it, but I forgot that one is pretty much straightforward. We've got the linear lines going. Okay, let's say we wanted those to be at 32 degrees as well. So let's take the angle, 32 degrees. There we go. And let's say instead of using the linear lines, we changed our mind. We want to use centralized, and we want to use a finer noise. Let's make it 60, which is a good value. And we want some finer noise in the spikes. I don't know, I forget these things. Anyway, so that's very cool. And I'm happy with that. Let's see if we're going to be using anything else. I don't think we're going to be using anything else. Now remember, you don't have to use every single effect with every time you use impact frames. You're only going to be using 2 or 3 max. It's not a rule. You can use more if it makes sense to, but honestly and truly, most of the time you're just going to be using 2 or 3. Mostly some form of line effect. Okay, so that's cool. We've got the inversion, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so now we have the mixer. Let's say we're happy, everything looks good. It's very cool. So you can see that it connects to the previous one every single time. So let's say we go from clean and then we use flash frame. There we go. And you would keyframe it to keep only one of these on at any given time, because as you can see, it's linked to the previous one. So the higher ones will have the priority over the lower ones. This is considered the latest one or the last one, so it has priority over the previous one. So you can see it says previous to inversion, previous to white background, previous to centralized lines, etc. Very straightforward. I actually use this to put my effects together for the little cartoon demo I posted a few days ago. So let me show you that. So here it is. I'm not going to render it right now because obviously it's a little heavy. So I'm just going to show you what the animation for the node group looks like. There. Okay. So that must mean our impact starts at about 15. So you can see there's nothing, and then it fades to the flash frame. Then we have a keyframe for the next one so that it has a place to start. Then it flips, and the next one has a place to start, and it flips again. Last one has a place to start, and the previous one stops. So you can see it's very, very quickly. I do want to add though, I've noticed that for the initial flash part, that the white lasts a lot longer than I thought it would. So in the edit, I've extended that white section, the brightest part of the flash frame type thing. So do remember that if you do do a flash kind of thing like this, don't be afraid to extend the wider part of it. Just don't overdo it. Obviously, it's supposed to be an impact frame, not a fade through white kind of situation. It can be, but just, yeah, generally it's not. So that's a very simple demonstration of what the animation could look like. I do note that this is very much compatible with Eevee. It's not just for cycles. So that's it for this one. Have a great one. God bless you, and thank you for purchasing.